Presiding Officer, can I welcome it being revisited? Poor Mr Maxwell, there he was gallantly defending SNP policy while its demise and his were being plotted. This Parliament has already agreed that the Scottish Government housing policy is seriously flawed, but despite this, the Scottish Government persists, cutting HAG levels, leading to rent increases or increased borrowing at the worst possible time, and introducing a lead developer model which can be seen as undermining entirely the critical role of community-based housing associations? Or are we to assume that in supporting our motion that the Cabinet Secretary in agreeing flexibility in procurement is in fact finally burying the lead developer role? And will she in the bygoing confirm that the GHA's aspiration to be a lead developer, given its role as a transitional body, will simply not be allowed? The problem, of course, with the firm foundations approach is that if the Scottish Government persists, it will seriously undermine the role of community-controlled housing associations. It is predicated on an assumption that housing associations have been feather-baited in some ways. They talk about reserves, but the reality is these reserves are used to plan not 2 years ahead, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years in advance. The very things that have sustained housing associations house at a time when council houses were falling into disrepair because council housing had been starved of investment. The very thing that makes them work is now being used in an inappropriate way. It talks about the economies of scale. We know the pressure of diseconomies of scale. If you've got a big organisation, it spends without thinking, and we need to reassert the importance of housing associations in community regeneration and sustaining local communities. And if the Scottish Government continues with this approach, they need to listen to those who are telling them that it will strengthen the role of the national housing associations at the expense of local housing associations. The Cabinet Secretary must back off this, and in particular she should address, in her summing up, a key point raised with me about the implications of the lead developer role. And that is that the proposals for lead developers would not allow charities, which the vast majority of the housing associations are, to undertake this role. They will need to change things to allow subsidiaries to do it. Not being RSLs, subsidiaries will not be able to receive HAG, which was the point which will then go to end users. So apart from undermining the whole reason for the proposal in the first place, that is to give all the resources to a one-stop shop regional expert, EU procurement rules would apply to the procurement of the lead developer, and it would have to be opened up to the private sector. Surely not the intention of the Government. I think we should apply the Swinney test to this policy, bearing in mind that destroying community-controlled housing associations was not in SNP's manifesto. The Parliament has opposed it, has voted against it, and times have changed. The worrying conclusion we have to draw is that the reason we shall not get this Cabinet Secretary to admit she is wrong on this, the reason she will not dump this policy along with local income tax, is because this policy does not require parliamentary endorsement. And if that is the case, where we find ourselves, the Scottish Government will persist with this, not because it's right, but because they can. That is the pre-1990 role of Scottish Office Administrative Devolution for Ministers, rather than a Scottish Government who is accountable to Parliament. And through it, to all those who are highly exercised and concerned about the current approach. We all agree we are in challenging and fast-changing and difficult times, but the test of government is whether they make the situation better or worse. This Scottish Government currently fails that test in relation to housing and the sustainability of social rented housing at a local community level. It is time that she graciously recognises that, thinks again, dumps the firm foundations document and policy which this Parliament has opposed, and work with housing associations, with people here and across the housing sector, in developing a housing policy that will make a difference to our local communities.